Hello and welcome. Happy Mental Health Week. Here in Canada, we are celebrating mental health this week, starting today right through till Sunday. So, we're going to have some information in regards to mental health on our website at www.theocdcoach.com, as well as our closed Facebook group. So, welcome. As always, the first Monday of the month, we have our Q&A. So you are able to ask questions in advance if you like, and submit the form with the Q&A in advance before our monthly meeting, or you can just attend or maybe do both. Fortunately, we would all like to be here, but people have prior commitments. Maybe you're working or you're not able to make a meeting one month. Definitely submit your Q&A. Feel free to do so. Okay, so let's get started. My name is Sandra Wallace. I'm a OCD, anxiety, and depression coach in Canada. I live in Manitoba, the province of Manitoba, and I work internationally with people to help guide them as their coach going through anxiety and OCD or depression or all three. So the topics that I choose are targeted towards those three types of concerns because I feel that there is not enough information out there, especially when it comes to anxiety, which we're talking about this evening, and all three for that matter. But tonight's focus is on anxiety, and definitely feel free to email us if there's something that you specifically want a theme on during our Q&A. In addition, we also have a gathering place that runs every last Wednesday of the month. So this month in May, we are having a guest speaker. Her name is AJ, and she's from Chicago, and she's going to talk about her anxiety and eating disorder and how it impacted her life. So I hope that you can attend that. That's the last Wednesday in May, and it starts at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. I'm just going to double check the date on the end of May. I should know that, sorry, but I will look into it, just make sure I give you the right date. Yes, May 29th. That's May 29th. It's a Wednesday. Always our gathering place is held on Wednesday evenings at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. She will share her story, and then she will leave some time and room for you to ask her specific questions. I think you'll really enjoy her talk, and I hope you can make it. So go ahead and register in advance if you like. And we have our website links up at the end of our session, so you'll be able to follow that if you need to record it. Again, our website is www.theocdcoach.com, and our email is info@theocdcoach.com. So let's get started. Tonight's questions are around anxiety, and some of the questions that came into us are specifically related to trauma. And I always say that trauma hides. We can see a physical injury very easily, like a broken arm or a sprained ankle or a cast of a leg in a cast, and that's visible. And we often ask people, how did that happen? Or how are things going? Can I help you? But when it comes to our mental health, we often can't see it. It's not so visible. And sometimes we wait a long time to reach out and get support. And often it's too late. By then, the symptoms are very prevalent and very obvious. So I want you to sit back tonight and keep an open mind on being able to come forward when you have anxiety and or when you have had trauma. As trauma hides, we need to be able to be forthcoming and tell people about it so that we are able to get the appropriate help that we need. So the first question I have is, what should I do if my anxiety is triggered by past traumas or unresolved issues? And this is a great question because often our anxiety will become elevated when we start to feel those past issues surface again. Sometimes we try to deal with past traumas by suppressing them and stuffing them in, but a lot of times it does not work. So what you need to do is be able to, the first question that we have here is be able to recognize when anxiety is triggered by past trauma or unresolved issues. So let's give the answer to that one. And the answer is, if your anxiety is triggered by past trauma or unresolved issues, it's important to prioritize your mental health and well-being. So I'm going to just go over some of the steps that you can do to help with that. First of all, acknowledging it. As I said earlier, acknowledgement is the first step. If we can acknowledge our feelings, then we can change them. If we're not acknowledging it, then we're not able to fix what's broken. So recognize and validating your emotions. It's okay to feel anxious or overwhelmed by past trauma or unresolved issues. We need to also seek support. And trauma is a very deep subject matter. And depending on what type of trauma, you may need to speak to experts in the trauma field. I know that for myself, working as a psych nurse for 29 years, we started a trauma team at the psychiatric hospital that I worked in. And we had to actually do the trauma education in stages, only because there's so much information to know about trauma, and then furthermore be able to help someone that's going through trauma or a past trauma. So first of all, we acknowledge it, acknowledge our feelings, and then we need to reach out to the experts. And as I always say to people, whether they work with me or anyone else, make sure that you ask the appropriate questions when you're talking to someone. Ask them what they do in the way of treatment. So in this specific situation, what type of experience do you have? I would ask the counselor or therapist or coach or whoever it is that you're reaching out to, what type of training do you have in this field? And you will learn quite readily if the person is qualified to help you. And it's really hard to open up about trauma. So you don't want to have to share your story over and over and over. So you want to make sure that you are seeking out the appropriate professional help. Okay, and then they can help you with the tools, the coping strategies to be able to manage your anxiety effectively. But not only that, they likely, if the trauma has resurfaced, you're probably going to want to start seeing someone on a regular basis to work through that trauma, because it often doesn't go away on its own. It has to be dealt with. And certain triggers, there'll be certain events that bring on our trauma or resurface. Another one is always practicing self-care. So when you're traumatized, you're going to notice it. It's going to show up in different ways in your body, physically, emotionally, and mentally. You may have trouble concentrating. You may feel really anxious to the point where you can't motivate yourself to go out and do things. So you really want to target and choose very specific activities that promote relaxation and stress reduction. So for some of you, it might be the exercise, it might be meditation, deep breathing. For some of you, it might be nature. Today, I spent 6 hours out raking and leaf blowing, and it felt so good to just be out with the nice sun coming down and the wind. And it felt great to just see the nice buds on the trees and see new life take place. So if that's something you like to do, then pick and choose very specifically where you're going to spend your time outside of work and sleep. Okay, the next one is we have to process our emotions. And so what does that look like even when we say process? We need to take the time to identify them and express our feelings in a healthy way. So for some of us, we find journaling really beneficial. It helps us to get our feelings out there on paper. Even if you're talking specifically about trauma and it's someone that you know, often trauma is something that comes to us in certain relationships. So even if you feel, well, I can't journal or put this person's name down because what if somebody sees it? I would suggest having an opportunity to be able to express fully how you're feeling and be able to keep that journal in a safe place. And if you want, after, a lot of times people will shred them or burn them or just take them and put them in recycling and be able to just release it. And so without even having to have anyone else share that. Another one is creative expressions. So finding ways to express yourself creatively. Now, not all of us are creative in the words we speak. Sometimes we have a hard time formulating sentences to express how we feel. So some of the expressions might come in the form of artwork. A lot of my patients would use art as a form of expressing themselves. And it was amazing how they were able to do that through the form of art. So sometimes just even subjects or objects, painting them and drawing them or whatever way they wanted to express it. And then being able to go over that with someone and say, this is how I feel. This is how I imagine the monster in my head, whoever it was that maybe traumatized them. Maybe that person is huge. And then the person themselves that have experienced the trauma, maybe they're this little tiny cartoon character or person. And that example right there shows that there's a monster and that person feels very small and maybe intimidated by that person. So that's just one quick example, but there's many, many, many types of expression that we can do through the way of art as one example. Another one is talking to a trusted friend or loved one, someone that you confide in, that you trust, that won't share that information with someone else, so that you can just release all that pent up emotion. And it also allows for clarity, because sometimes when we speak out loud, we hear ourselves talk and we're able to identify what's going on emotionally. So an example of that might be, have you ever sat with somebody and allowed them to just to vent and express themselves and said very little, and then the person thanked you in the end, but you really hadn't done anything, but the person just needed that sounding board, that person to be able to talk to. And I always tell people, you know what, you do have the answers within. It's just that you're not right now and here asking the right questions. So sometimes it takes a while to explore and gain that clarity. Another one is setting boundaries. Oh, this can be so hard. A lot of us are givers, so we have trouble with boundaries. And when we set boundaries, we feel like we're being disrespectful or rude to others. But remember that saying that I always say, you need to be selfish to be selfless, meaning you need to take time and be selfish so that you have more of yourself to offer the world and your friends and family. So if you're establishing boundaries with yourself and others to protect your emotional well-being, you're going to notice that you're not so mentally drained or physically drained, because you're going to be able to set limits. And this may involve limiting exposure to triggers or situations that exacerbate your anxiety. So knowing your triggers is really key. And sometimes when I'm coaching with people, they won't even know their triggers. But as we talk, we go over the experience of what they've gone through, then sometimes we can see a pattern, a common thread or a pattern in what exacerbates their anxiety. And then, of course, there's different forms of therapy. Now, I'm not experienced in a lot of these other ones other than cognitive behavior therapy. That's the form of treatment I use with my clients. But there is what's called EMDR, and it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And this is a form of therapy where a therapist that's trained, again, they need to be trained in it, will use eye movement. So they will take their finger and have you guide watch their finger and move your eyes along with their finger. So they will go up and down, side to side, on an angle like this, and they'll continue to do that. And I don't want to be disrespectful because I don't know enough about it, but for some people that has helped with post and past trauma and unresolved issues. And I don't know how it helps, but I do know that it is effective for some. So again, if you're looking at trying that, make sure that you're able to search out a specialist in that field. And then there's trauma focused therapy, which are these are all specifically designed to address past trauma and unresolved issue. Now, I will say this about when you are considering therapy, make sure that you're at a point where the readiness is there, because once you start opening up all those feelings, you're going to need some time to work through it. And it's very, very emotionally draining. So the readiness has to be there and the supports have to be there. Absolutely. Okay. And then mindfulness can come in, and you can incorporate mindfulness techniques into your daily routine to stay present and grounded. So what do I mean by present and grounded? When we're present, we're in the here and the now. Sometimes I'm trying to think of an example where we could all identify, because not all of us have gone through trauma. Most people have. 89% of people living with a mental health disorder have actually experienced at least one trauma, possibly more. So I look at that like 100% almost. So, but when we are present, we are in the here and now. I want to use maybe an example like when you're driving to work, or you have children and you're driving them to school every day back and forth. Your brain goes into autopilot. And sometimes you look back and think, how did I even get to school? Like, we were talking, the kids are out of the vehicle, I'm going back home now. It just happens naturally, right? And so you're not really aware of your surroundings. You're kind of in autopilot, but being present is actually taking in your surroundings. So in that same example, you may be driving, but you're taking in the scenery, the sounds, the fragrance of the area that you're in. That's being mindful and being present. And grounded is being able to just acknowledge that you are aware and you feel like you're in the here and now. You're grounded, you've got support, you're anchored. Now, mindfulness meditations, there's many types, and we've talked about them in the past sessions, so we won't spend a lot of time on there, but there's body scans, just being able to focus in on one part of your body at a time, focusing on your senses, will also help manage intrusive thoughts and emotions. So there's many different types, and maybe we'll have another session on this particular type of topic. I'm looking at getting in one of my friends, a doctor in Winnipeg that does a lot of mindfulness techniques. And I'm going to reach out to her and see if she wants to be one of our guests on the gathering place, our monthly gathering place on the last Wednesday of the month. So stay tuned for that. This month, it's AJ from Chicago going to be talking to us at the end of May on anxiety and eating disorders. Okay. So another thing you need to do is give yourself time. Actually, healing from past traumas and those unresolved issues, it takes a lot of time. There's no amount of time that specifically that you can say there's a starting point and an end point. There's going to be peaks and valleys, just like with OCD. There's peaks and valleys where things are going really well, and then you have a dip, and then things are going really well, and then you have a dip. So this is much the same, and you need to give self-compassion to yourself. So be gentle, be kind, celebrate those small victories along the way. And remember, you're never alone. There's always support available to you to help you navigate through your anxiety and overcome past challenges. So the next question is, how can I maintain healthy relationships and social connections despite my anxiety? Great question, whoever submitted that. What can you do? Because sometimes anxiety has a grip on us and we think we can't even function. I know there was a time where I didn't want to be around anybody because my anxiety was so high and I was worried about how I would respond to people around me. So I never did want to make those connections. And you know what? It actually made my anxiety worse in the long run. So if you're sitting here thinking the same thing, I want to encourage you that if you maintain those healthy relationships and social connections, while managing anxiety, it can be challenging, but more importantly, it's possible. And there's strategies and support. So we're going to go over some tips to help you navigate social interactions and foster that positive relationship. And I'm going to start with one of the ones is communicating with others. Now, sometimes we are so quick to judge our own thoughts and our own feelings, and we pass that on to other people and say, well, you know what? I can't be honest with my friends because they may not accept the fact that I have anxiety. They may look at it like weakness. There might be other thoughts that come into play. But the fact of the matter is, if they are, again, healthy relationships, because there's a difference between healthy and unhealthy, then the important thing is if they're healthy to begin with, they're going to maintain a healthy relationship and they're going to accept you unconditionally. So you need to let them know how it affects you and what they can do to support you. Okay, so I'm just going to take a pause here and have a drink. Okay, thank you. All right, so let them know how it affects you, and then good communication can also help alleviate misunderstandings and strengthen your relationships. Often we see anxiety as a weakness or a flaw, but it is not that at all. So we have to be able to be open about it and talk about it. Okay. The other thing that I want you to keep in mind is setting realistic expectations. So again, when we're thinking anxiety and we have these catastrophic thoughts or our anxiety is really elevated, we need to be able to set realistic expectations. So it's okay to have limits and boundaries when it comes to socializing. It doesn't mean you have to go out and say yes to everybody and do everything that is asked of you. Excuse me, because this is going to put added pressure on yourself, and then you may not be able to do any of it. So be realistic and set limits for yourself. Okay. And practice self-compassion. So being kind, acknowledging it's okay to feel anxious, especially in social situations, because if we're isolating ourselves, like I often did for a long, long time, when I was going out to social situations, I felt overwhelming anxiety. How many of you can even think about COVID during COVID when despite anxiety or not, even people living without anxiety, they told me that they started to get really anxious when they started to go out after the lockdown occurred because they were removed from social settings. And I always remember for myself, that was a big one during COVID, when I did start going out again. I started to get my anxiety back that I had when I was diagnosed with OCD in 95. And I remember going to my hairdressers and I just had I felt like I was bringing on a panic attack while I was sitting in there because there was so much stimulation, like hair dryers and people talking and walking in and out, and the phones are ringing. And I said to myself, why am I feeling this way? And I realized it was because I had been so far removed from social situations for so long that the old me was starting to show up again. So again, like we talked about in the beginning, acknowledgement is the key to change. So once I acknowledged it, I was able to recognize it for what it was and say, you know what, I have to work through this. So be in touch with your emotions, acknowledge what's happening physically and mentally for you, and treat yourself with the same empathy and understanding that you would to your child or a friend or a neighbor. And then focus on quality over quantity. So it is a myth. I don't know if any of you know this, but you don't need a whole lot of friends. People feel they need all these friends, and nowadays with social media, people want likes and followers. And the reality is, we don't need a whole lot of friends. We just need a few that are going to show up in the arena for us in a time of need. And those people are the people that bring you joy, support, laughter, happiness. There's a list, an endless list, right? Depending what it is that is meaningful for you. So quality relationships can provide a sense of belonging and security. And as a result, this helps lower our anxiety too. And then what do you actually like to do? Sometimes anxiety will rob us of what we enjoy, or if we have depression along with anxiety. There was a time where when I was depressed, I didn't enjoy anything really. So I had to start slowly integrating back what my old interests were, or maybe a new interest or hobby that you genuinely enjoy and feel comfortable with. So again, the anxiety can be decreased if it's something that you specifically like. If you don't like it, it can actually increase your anxiety because it's not who you are as a person. Okay. And this will ultimately increase the feelings of connection with others who share your own interest. And then those relaxation techniques, they often show up with a lot of things we talk about only because they help calm the body physically. Remember, we have a central nervous system and a parasympathetic nervous system. And when we're anxious, our body kicks into high gear and it feels that there's a sense of danger, even when there isn't. So we need to train our brains and our body to stay calm. Even when there is a stressful situation, we can work through it and get on the other side of it quicker if we know techniques to bring things into a calming perspective. And seeking support. Now, not everybody likes support groups. It really depends where you're at in your journey. For some, they find support groups overwhelming and anxiety provoking. So I work with each client individually to see where they're at. They may not want to do support groups initially. Halfway through, they may start experimenting with support groups online or in person. And for some, they never do attend support groups. So it's very individual. But if you do decide to go with the support group, again, do your homework and find out what they're all about. And the main thing is when you connect with others who understand what you're going through, this actually can give you validation, encouragement, and practical coping strategies. And another thing that sometimes is overlooked, people are trying to get results quickly and they want to feel better and get to that happy place quick. So they're kind of on the accelerated program where they want everything to change quickly. But I think that we need to sit and challenge thought patterns because it's our thoughts that often get us in this spiral of negative thinking. So if we can recognize and challenge the negative thoughts or beliefs about yourself or certain situations that trigger you, we can actually reframe them into more balanced and realistic perspectives. So I often will spend time, I don't know if there's anyone that I worked with where we never worked on challenging negative thoughts to some degree. For some of us, especially with people that I work with anxiety and OCD, this is really, really helpful where we can put it into perspective, but it takes some time. So we will spend several sessions going through and challenging those thoughts. And it's really wonderful to see when people's pattern of thought shifts and it pivots, because they will spend moments with that negative thought and quickly resort to a positive thought or a reframed thought about it that doesn't stir up anxiety. And that's such a good feeling to see when I actually witness that with clients. So it does work. You just need to work it. And then we need to take baby steps sometimes, or small steps. We need to do the gradual exposure, and whether it be a social situation that triggers the anxiety, or a certain specific phobia. Remember, we talk about 5 different types of anxiety. We've got, just as a refresher, generalized anxiety disorder, social phobia, specific phobia, agoraphobia, and panic disorder. So again, taking those steps, gradually increasing exposure over time by building that foundation, that hierarchy lists of what it is that triggers your anxiety. And then we celebrate. We celebrate the smallest wins, no matter how small, and we're patient with ourselves and we work towards our goals. Okay, so again, it's okay to seek out for support and develop coping strategies that allow you to thrive in social settings while managing your anxiety. So the next question is, are there cultural or religious practices that can be helpful in managing anxiety? Now, the world has many, many different types of cultures and religious practices. I am not an expert in this field. I just speak in general terms, depending on people's religion or culture. And I love learning about people's culture. I am a Christian, I'm a Roman Catholic, and I have been all my life. And I'm not afraid to share that with people, that I believe in God. And for some of you, you may believe in God, you may have a higher power of some other source, whatever it is. But I just focus on, when I'm working with people, if they are from a religious practice, then we work on our faith base as well. But if they're not, then sometimes they need to look at outside sources to help them with that aspect. But let's talk a little bit about cultural or religious practices in managing anxiety. So there are indeed cultural and religious practices that people find helpful. So again, we've got the meditation. And this actually applies in various cultures and religions. They can help calm the mind, reduce stress, promote relaxation. And prayer for individuals who are religious. Prayer and participation in spiritual rituals can provide comfort, support, and a sense of connection to something greater than themselves. So this can offer solace during times of anxiety and uncertainty. So what does that look like for prayer coming from different spiritual backgrounds? Excuse me, it might be reading the Bible, reading scriptures out of the Bible, doing certain prayers for inspiring help, for faith-based, for praying for guidance or strength. There's many different types. So again, depending on the person, and also they may have a support network in their specific communities or religious communities. So it might be a priest or a deacon, it might be a pastor, it might be a counselor. A lot of the churches and a lot of spiritual connections out there today have their own schools, their own churches, their own offices. So Participating in communal gatherings, ceremonies, or group activities can foster a sense of belonging, reducing feelings of isolation, and provide that emotional support during difficult times. But again, just like anything else, you need to feel that connection with that person. So when it comes to your prayer and spiritual rituals, you want to feel connected and know that you trust that person to be able to help you. So again, do your homework, find out, their qualifications as well. And also in different cultures, there may be unique traditions and healing practices that are passed down through multiple generations. So for some, when it comes to traditions, they may only use herbal remedies and stay away from OTCs, like over-the-counter medication or prescribed medication. They may just do herbals. There may be storytelling, music, dance, or ceremonies that promote emotional healing and well-being. I know for myself, I come from an Indigenous background, so my family went out to the bush and picked herbs and flowers and branches, and they would make big pots. Oh, sorry, that we just had a bird hit the window. Sorry, I hate when that happens. I hope he's okay. Healing practices. Oh, sorry. So yeah, and they would make, my kukum would make a big pot of herbal remedies, and that's what we would drink if we were sick. Or we would use bear ointment for eczema or for dryness in our on our skin. That would help clear up our skin problems. Storytelling is another one. For different cultures, they do storytelling to help heal. So yeah, there's many different types. Excuse me. So the next one is values and belief systems. Cultural and religious values and belief systems can often give you that guidance and strength and a sense of purpose in navigating life's challenges. And that also applies to anxiety, but many other things. It could apply to our work, our career orientation, our goals and dreams for our future. And drawing upon these principles can provide individuals with a framework for understanding and coping with their emotions. Now, I just want to pause and I want to add to that. Sometimes we've come from a family or a background where the belief systems are not the same as they are in this day and age. So, for example, if somebody came from a family that said you have to go to post-secondary school, you have to get a degree, have to do something in the way of a doctor or a lawyer, and if that person has a lot of anxiety and a lot of anxiety around going to post-secondary school, it may be really super difficult for them to be able to get through the school system based on their needs, their current needs at the time. So you really have to look at this. It's very individual, because I know that I've worked with people that have become lawyers and doctors, and they've been my clients, and they're not happy doing that. They're not happy, but they were told based on their past belief system that they had to go back to, they had to go to school after grade 12 and get a degree in something, and something that was prestigious or looked upon as a good career, but at the cost of their mental well-being. So it's not for everyone. I think, again, very individual for what the person is going through and if they're able to follow through with that. So again, some culture and religious traditions emphasize the interconnections of the mind, body, and spirit. There's a lot of people out there that are doing yoga, Tai Chi, or traditional healing modalities, which can focus on restoring balance and harmony within the individual and have ultimately a positive impact on mental health. So think about some other things other than these. These are great examples, but it might be joining a gym. It might be just going for regular walks alone or with someone else. It doesn't have to be specifically, what the majority of people are doing. I always say if it works for you, then let it work. Keep doing what you're doing. Okay, and recognize that the effectiveness of these practices may vary. So what works for one may not work for another. Actually, and what works for you now or last time you were going through a lot of anxiety may not work this time. So it's good to have a few different options. And additionally, while culture and religious practices can be valuable tools for managing anxiety, they should complement and not replace professional treatment when needed. And I think that's a really important piece is sometimes you need to have 2 or 3 different people working with you. I recently connected with a client that has 4 different therapists. I, as a coach, then a therapist to work through her trauma, a therapist to work through her mental health, overall well-being, and then a therapist to work on a pastor to work with her spiritual aspects. And it works well because we all have our lane of expertise, and she's able to reach out to each of us to be able to work on that. Now, can I give her guidance in other aspects? Maybe a little, or a recommendation, or we could have a little conversation, but I don't pretend to be the expert in everything. And I really honor her and value her decision to make sure that she has a few different therapists out there that are helping her, and it works for her. So that's great. So what steps can you and I take to address anxiety related if we are going through perfectionism and fear of failure? Now, this question is good because the question relates to both perfectionism and fear of failure. And often these go hand in hand. People become perfectionists because they are so afraid of failing. And I love this because I always tell people that I don't even like the word failure. I like the word failing forward. You're not really failing. I think we only fail if we give up, if we don't keep trying. So this involves a combination of self-awareness, self-compassion, and practical strategies. So we have to be aware, but we also have to be compassionate with ourselves and actually implement strategies. So we need to recognize perfectionist tendencies. So acknowledge and accept that you have perfectionist tendencies. This doesn't mean that you are a perfectionist. Maybe you just have a few areas of your life where you tend to want to be very perfect at that. And I always say done beats perfect. If you could say done beats perfect when you're contemplating, well, I'm not ready to do this. It's not quite perfect. I don't know if I have it all together. Just do it. Because the more we do things, I know with my business, even with working with people as an OCD and anxiety coach, there's lots of times I will put programs together. They're not perfect, but it based on the feedback I get from clients and when I'm speaking at events or at conferences, the feedback I get, then I can tweak things, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Because if we wait for things to be perfect, it will never happen. Okay, so recognize the perfectionist tendencies, acknowledge, accept that you have them, and they may be contributing to your anxiety and fear of failure. So again, awareness, first step to positive change. And then we can start challenging those unrealistic standards and expectations that we put on ourselves. Often it's nobody else, it's us putting them on ourselves. We are our worst critic, often, with that imposter syndrome where we sit on our shoulders and we say things in our ears like, you can't do that. I remember when I wrote my first book and my second book, when I was done writing and I had it published and it made #1 on Amazon, with both books, I kind of came to a screeching halt. And I remember standing in my front entranceway and I kind of just stopped and I looked up at the door and my hands kind of went up at the same time. And I went, what do you think you're doing? Writing a book. You can't do that. Who are you to think you could write a book? And so it was really interesting because again, I had to challenge myself and say, yes, you can. It may not be perfect. You did it. It's out there for the world to see. And more importantly, it wasn't about me. It was about you and the audience and people that are learning to understand more about OCD. So we need to challenge the unrealistic standards and expectations you set for yourself, and that perfection is unattainable and making mistakes is a normal part of the learning process. Think back just for a moment on other areas of your life, just aside from anxiety, where you made some huge mistakes, but also it was turning points in your life to make better choices going forward. If we're not making mistakes, we're not being able to allow ourselves to learn and grow. So I think mistakes are necessary for us to become better human beings. And again, we need to practice self-compassion because we are, like I said, our worst critic. We need to be kind and compassionate. And when we have setbacks or make mistakes, let's just acknowledge them and work through it and say, okay, what have I learned from it? And another thing I like to do a lot, I've done this all my life, is always say, okay, let's look at the worst case scenario. Can we handle it? Can we get through that? And the answer is yes. Then it's not so scary. So again, treat yourself like you would and show understanding and empathy for yourself. Remember, sympathy is feeling sorry for someone. Empathy is feeling with someone. So you don't want to always be thinking, oh, that's too bad. So sad. You want to be able to have empathy and say, it's okay. I messed up, but I'm going to keep going. And I've learned valuable lessons from it. So be kind to yourself. Okay. And then set realistic goals. Set realistic, achievable goals that allow for growth and progress rather than perfection. And break larger tasks into smaller ones, more manageable steps, and celebrate your accomplishments along the way. Okay. And focus on effort and progress. Shift your focus from outcome oriented thinking to process oriented thinking, because the value, the effort you put into your endeavors and recognize the progress you make will be very helpful regardless of the outcome. And there's, excuse me, there's those negative thoughts. Again, we need to challenge the negative thoughts on the perfectionist and the concept of failing. So what do? We replace them with more balanced and realistic perspective that will acknowledge your strengths and resilience. And embrace it. Embrace it as a natural and essential part of being human, and recognize that vulnerability and authenticity can foster deeper connections with others and lead to personal growth. Lastly, we will talk about breathing and seeking support. So again, we need to seek support and coping strategies. We need to always know that if we need to seek out professional help, it's there for us. We just have to be strategic on reaching out to the appropriate ones. Okay. And often with this one, CBT is very helpful in this realm, because we can provide you with valuable tools and techniques for managing the perfectionism and anxiety. One thing that's really good to do with this one is to be able to give people tasks and things that they feel they need to be perfect on before proceeding, and have them do the tasks and events and whatever it might be. And excuse me, purposely do it imperfect. Okay, so perfectionism and fear of failure is a journey that takes time and effort. Need to be patient with yourself, celebrate the small wins, and take proactive steps to address these challenges. Excuse me. Excuse me, you can cultivate a healthy relationship with yourself and achieve greater peace of mind. Sorry. So again, I encourage you to join our OCD private coach Facebook, that we have people from all walks of life living with anxiety, OCD, and or depression. We can also be found on the various social platforms by searching the OCD coach. And please, by all means, stay connected and informed on your journey to better mental health. Sorry. And that brings us to a close for the evening. As I always promote, if you want to learn more about specific CBT for OCD, we have our books, my book out on Amazon. The first book is Stop Obsessing, Start Overcoming. And the second book is OCD, The 6 Secrets to the Deliverance from OCD. And this is a more in-depth book on the start to completion of how to overcome OCD. And both books can be ordered on Amazon, the Amazon in your country specifically. And this book that I co-authored with, called Reach Your Greatness, was published by Nick and Megan Unsworth, which were some great mentors of mine, and James Melanchuk, who was my coach. And they gave us the opportunity to be part of this wonderful book where we can encourage others to reach their greatness. Now, if you are looking for more information or want to speak specifically about your needs, I have and will continue to always offer what I call my 50-minute free consult. If you're curious about how we can support you further on your path to well-being, book a free consultation at this website, at this link. And we also have the link up on our website. And this will allow you to be able to ask specific questions that are relevant to your needs, and we can find a strategy to work together as your coach on overcoming that. Now, there's also a scan bar here if you want to scan to book a call, or you can also go to www.theocdcoach.com. And lastly, I want to thank you for your time. We all are busy, but I thank you for being able to be part of this Q&A. And our next session is June 3rd, always at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. The link is always the same. And if you want to send your questions in advance, by all means do so. So again, please visit our website for further information on our various programs at www.theocdcoach.com. We're always just an email away at info@theocdcoach.com, or call us directly at 1-204-295-4408. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube. I will meet you there.